Daniel and Laura Harper had always been proud of their daughter, Emily, a quiet, intelligent girl who seemed harmless to anyone who met her. From the outside, they appeared to be a normal family living in the peaceful town of Brookdale. Friendly neighbors, hardworking parents, and a bright young woman who kept mostly to herself. No one suspected that behind Emily's calm and distant demeanor, something far darker was quietly growing. Beneath the surface of those ordinary routines, a chilling transformation was taking place, one that would turn the Harper family's home into a scene of unimaginable horror and make Emily the very nightmare her parents never saw coming. The town of Brookdale was the kind of place where life moved slowly and quietly. It was surrounded by open fields, small wooded areas, and narrow roads that curved through peaceful neighborhoods. Most people in the town had lived there for many years, and many families knew each other for generations. Neighbors greeted one another in the mornings. Children rode their bicycles along quiet streets, and the sound of laughter often carried through the warm summer evenings. Serious crime was almost unheard of, and the residents believed their town was one of the safest places anyone could live. In the center of one of Brookdale's quiet neighborhoods stood the Harper family home. It was an ordinary two-story house with a small front yard and a white fence that had slowly faded with time. Daniel and Laura Harper had lived there for nearly 2 decades. Daniel worked long hours at a local hardware store, while Laura managed a small bookkeeping job from home. They were known as polite but private people who rarely attracted attention. Their only child, Emily Harper, had grown up inside that house. From a young age, Emily had always seemed different from other children in the neighborhood. While other kids gathered outside to play games or explore nearby woods, Emily usually stayed indoors. She preferred spending time alone, reading books or writing quietly in notebooks that she kept hidden in her room. At school, Emily performed well academically. Her teachers often described her as intelligent and focused. However, she rarely spoke during class discussions and almost never joined group activities. Her quiet nature made her difficult to understand. Some classmates believed she was simply shy, while others thought she preferred isolation. As the years passed, Emily's quiet behavior slowly turned into something more unusual. She began distancing herself from almost everyone around her, including her own family. The peaceful life inside the Harper house started to feel. As Emily moved deeper into her teenage years, the changes in her behavior became harder to ignore. She still attended school regularly and continued earning strong grades, but something about her attitude had shifted. Her presence felt distant, as if she were physically there but mentally somewhere else. Teachers noticed that she rarely reacted to anything around her. Praise, criticism, or even excitement from classmates seemed to pass by her without much response. Emily spent most of her time alone. During lunch breaks, she often sat in quiet corners of the school cafeteria or outside on empty benches. While other students talked, laughed, and made plans, Emily kept her head lowered, writing in the same notebooks she carried everywhere. Those notebooks slowly filled with page after page of strange and unsettling thoughts. Some of her writings described dark emotions that seemed far beyond normal teenage frustration. She wrote about control, power, and the idea of people being obstacles in someone's life. Other pages contained fictional crime scenarios written in surprising detail. The situations described in those pages were often complex and carefully thought out, almost like someone studying how crimes could happen without being discovered. One teacher eventually noticed a few of these pages while collecting assignments. The content raised concern, and the school counselor briefly reviewed Emily's work. Although the writing appeared disturbing, it was dismissed as creative fiction from a quiet teenager with an active imagination. No serious action followed, and the notebooks were returned. At home, Emily's parents were also struggling to understand her growing distance. She spent long hours inside her room with the door closed, sometimes staying awake late into the night. The soft glow of her computer screen often lit the room long after the rest of the house had gone quiet. Neighbors occasionally noticed Emily walking alone late in the evening. As Emily entered adulthood, her isolation grew deeper. The quiet distance that once seemed like simple shyness had now turned into a complete separation from the world around her. She no longer made any effort to connect with people. Former classmates moved on with their lives, finding jobs, attending college, or building relationships, while Emily remained almost completely alone. Most days were spent inside the Harper house. Emily rarely left except for brief errands or late-night walks through the quiet streets of Brookdale. Her parents noticed the growing gap between them and their daughter, but every attempt to bring her closer seemed to fail. Family routines slowly faded. Meals were rarely shared together, and long periods passed without meaningful interaction. Inside her bedroom, Emily created a private world that no one else could see. Her desk was filled with notebooks, papers, and a computer that remained active for hours every night. The writings inside her notebooks had changed. What once looked like disturbing fiction now appeared far more calculated. The pages described detailed crime scenarios with careful planning, possible outcomes, and ways someone might avoid suspicion. She studied criminal cases online, reading reports and articles about investigations from different parts of the country. Instead of reacting with fear or shock, Emily appeared fascinated by the strategies investigators used to solve crimes. She carefully noted how criminals were caught and what mistakes led to their capture. At the same time, a growing resentment toward her parents was quietly building in her mind. Emily believed her life had been controlled for too long. She blamed them for her isolation, her lack of freedom, and the frustration she felt every day. That resentment slowly turned into something darker. In her notebooks, certain plans started appearing again and again. These plans were no longer fictional stories. They described situations that could happen. The night that changed everything began like any other evening in Brookdale. The streets were quiet, and most houses had already turned off their lights as families settled into their nightly routines. A cold wind moved through the neighborhood, rustling the dry leaves along sidewalks and empty driveways. Inside the Harper house, the night appeared calm and ordinary from the outside. Hours passed in silence as the town slept peacefully. Nothing unusual could be seen from the street, and no neighbors reported hearing anything suspicious during the night. The quiet atmosphere of the neighborhood remained undisturbed until early morning. Shortly after sunrise, an emergency call reached local authorities. The details were unclear at first, but the situation inside the Harper home quickly drew immediate attention. Police vehicles arrived at the house, breaking the calm of the street with flashing lights that caught the attention of nearby residents. When officers entered the home, they were met with a disturbing scene that none of them had expected. Daniel and Laura Harper were discovered lifeless inside their own house. The discovery instantly turned the quiet home into a major crime scene. Investigators quickly began examining the property. What they found raised many questions. The front door was locked, and there were no signs of forced entry anywhere in the house. Windows were closed and secure. Nothing appeared stolen or damaged, and the rooms were mostly undisturbed. One detail stood out immediately. Emily Harper was nowhere to be found. At first, investigators believed she might have escaped from the house during a dangerous situation. Search teams began looking for her throughout the neighborhood, believing she could still be in danger somewhere nearby. News spread rapidly across Brookdale. Residents watched police activity with growing shock and fear. Many could not believe such a violent crime had taken place in their quiet town. As investigators continued examining the Harper house, every room was carefully searched for clues. The process was slow and detailed. Officers photographed the scene, collected evidence, and documented every object that could possibly explain what had happened during the night. At first glance, the home looked almost normal, which made the situation even more unsettling. When detectives entered Emily's bedroom, they immediately noticed how different the room felt compared to the rest of the house. The space was neat but unusually quiet, as if someone had carefully organized everything before leaving. On a desk near the window sat several thick notebooks stacked on top of each other. Inside those notebooks, investigators discovered page after page of disturbing writing. Many of the pages described violent situations with shocking detail. Some entries outlined step-by-step plans showing how someone could commit a crime and avoid suspicion afterward. The descriptions were calm, organized, and written with surprising patience. As detectives read further, certain passages began to stand out. A few scenarios looked very similar to the crime that had taken place inside the Harper home. The similarities were too strong to ignore. The discovery raised immediate concerns among investigators. The search continued, and officers turned their attention to Emily's computer. Digital records showed months of online research connected to criminal investigations. There were searches about forensic science, police response times, and how investigators solved difficult cases. It became clear that someone had spent a long time studying how crimes were investigated. The investigation then expanded outside the house. Detectives reviewed security cameras from nearby streets and buildings. One camera positioned several houses away had captured something important. During the late hours of the night, a single person was seen leaving the Harper property and walking quietly. As the investigation continued, authorities expanded their search far beyond the quiet streets of Brookdale. Detectives knew that if Emily had planned to leave the town, she might already be miles away. Teams began reviewing every possible record connected to her life, hoping to find a clue that could reveal where she had gone. Bank activity quickly drew their attention. Emily had access to a small personal savings account that her parents had opened for her years earlier. When investigators examined the records, they noticed something unusual. Several weeks before the crime, small amounts of money had been withdrawn from the account on different days. The withdrawals were not large enough to attract immediate attention, but together they formed a careful pattern. It appeared that someone had been quietly preparing for a long trip. Further examination of Emily's computer revealed more troubling details. Her internet search history contained dozens of searches related to travel routes, bus stations, and inexpensive places to stay in cities far from Brookdale. She had also researched how people could travel without leaving clear digital records. Detectives began piecing together a timeline of her actions. The planning had started months earlier. Emily had studied transportation schedules, mapped out routes to different cities, and identified locations where she could temporarily disappear among strangers. Inside her notebooks, investigators also found rough travel plans written in small, organized lists. These pages mentioned bus lines, rest stops, and towns located several hours away from Brookdale. Some notes even included reminders about avoiding cameras and busy locations. The evidence suggested that Emily had prepared for every step of her escape. Weeks passed after the tragedy in Brookdale, and Emily Harper remained missing. Investigators continued searching across nearby towns and larger cities, following every possible lead that could reveal where she had gone. Tips arrived from different places, but most of them quickly turned out to be false sightings. The longer the search continued, the more difficult the investigation became. Detectives carefully reviewed transportation records, surveillance footage, and financial activity connected to Emily. After weeks of searching, investigators finally received information that led them to a distant city several states away from Brookdale. Authorities had been quietly tracking possible sightings connected to Emily Harper, and one lead began to stand out from the rest. A young woman matching her description had recently rented a small room in a crowded neighborhood where people often came and went without drawing much attention. Surveillance teams began monitoring the location carefully. The woman living there had changed her appearance. Her hair was shorter, and her clothing style was different from the images investigators had first shared with the public. At first glance, she looked like someone trying to start a completely new life among strangers. However, small details still matched the missing suspect. Her height, posture, and movements strongly resembled Emily. Investigators compared recent surveillance footage with older photographs and concluded that they had finally located her. Authorities moved in quietly and took her into custody without incident. The arrest ended weeks of uncertainty that had surrounded the Harper family tragedy. News of her capture quickly spread back to Brookdale, where residents had been following every update with disbelief. As investigators reviewed the full collection of evidence, a disturbing picture began to form. Emily's notebooks contain months of planning and careful preparation. Her online research showed a deep interest in criminal investigations and methods used by law enforcement. Financial records and travel plans confirmed that she had prepared for her escape long before the crime took place. The peaceful town of Brookdale struggled to understand how someone raised in their quiet community could commit such a horrifying act. Many residents had watched Emily grow up and never imagined that darkness had been developing behind her quiet behavior. The Harper house remained empty after the tragedy.